tell me about your very first computer.
That's going back a long time. It's mid-80s. I wanted a Commodore 64. Ended up with a VIC-20 because my dad said to me, like, well, it's a lot of money, so we'll see how it goes. So we got this VIC-20, and I absolutely loved it. 5K, 3.5K usable. And I thought, this is all right, Got a game on it called Abductor by Jeff Minter. And I thought, this is amazing. Looked into who Jeff Minter was, looked at some of the magazines, and I thought, somebody could make a living out of this. There's a few people making a living out of this. Maybe I could make a living out of this. And that was it, I was hooked. So I started programming on the VIC-20. Not very good, pretty rubbish really. Got into doing some graphics, got into it. So Christmas later, I wanted a Commodore 64 again, and the Commodore announced the 128. So although the VIC-20 was my first computer, it was really until I got the Commodore 128, which most of the time spent in 64 mode, I got really into it. I started learning 6502, did some sprites, did some backgrounds, and that was pretty much it. That was my path into wanting to be a game developer. Yes.
So you were a programmer before you became an artiste.
I would say programmer loosely. I mean, I got some routines of like sprites running around and some scrolling and all that sort of stuff you do in like sort of machine code. But it was the graphics that really got me, because I'm an artist. That's what I did. I went to art school and always drawn and painted. But I had this decision to make. So do I go the programmer route or do I go the graphics route? And the graphics gave you much more of an immediate result rather than sitting there for hours and then you're programming and it crashes and it does this. I can't really do with that. Graphics was an instant hit. I thought, I love it. So graphics is where I went, and I just really got into it. And I used to study the arcade machines at the day in the 80s and late 80s. I'd go down the arcades with my camcorder and borrow a camera and that. And we'd video the arcade machines, and I'd be such a nerd because I'd go up close to them like this, get them in focus, and trying to get the actual images of the pixels to see whether I could replicate them on my Commodore or and it just went from there really, and just wanted to try and create stuff that looked like the arcades, and that was the bug, and off I was.
So what were some of the arcade games that really wowed you from an artistic perspective?
Well, I mean, back then you're looking at machines like Galaxian, Space Invaders, Pac-Man. So the early ones is where I got drawn in, and Donkey Kong. But when you got the next generation where they had more colours, that's when I was like, these are really cool. Like you had like Sidearms, Nemesis, then later Salamander. Those machines, they really kind of like sort of ticked a few boxes for me. Because I thought, I wonder if we could replicate that on a home computer. And so that was my mission, I suppose, without realising. I thought, I'm going to try and do this. Because back then, everything was innovative. You had to add innovation. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'll try and do that. And started to build up a portfolio and did some 64 sprites and tried to make them look really good. I mean, there's a lot of games on the 64 that really had that arcade look. And I was just inspired by that sort of stuff. So, so those early machines. Then later, you had all the Capcom stuff and the Konami stuff. And then you had the SNK stuff, which is really amazing.
Oh, sure.
Like Metal Slug. I mean, Metal Slug to me is like the pinnacle of really good pixel art. Mm-hmm. And that's something that really inspired me. I mean, even to this day, I look at it, I think, those guys know what they're doing. And even when you look at the subsequent versions of Metal Slug, it's quality through and through, and you think the amount of work that gone into those, I can really appreciate. Being a pixel artist, I can really appreciate what goes into them, but it's all inspirational, So.
Yeah. Now, lots of kids in the 80s went home and took out graph paper and started drawing pixel art pictures, but not all of them went on to have careers in the industry. So what was it that you did that really that birthed the career side of things?
That's a good question. I've got no idea. I think I was just lucky. Maybe I'm being modest. I don't know. I wanted to be a game developer. And before I got any gigs doing art for people, I actually knocked on doors. I come from East London. So I went around London with a portfolio. When I got my first Amiga, I built up a portfolio of work. And I went through knocking at doors at publishers all in London and just got the door shut. No, not interested. It's like, okay. And it really was, an uphill struggle to try and get into the industry. And it was only because a friend of mine had some games published, and he was doing a game on the Amiga, and he said, there's a guy I know who's looking for an artist. And he said, if you give him your portfolio disc, I'll put a word in for you. So that's what I did, and I got a couple of games with this company called Impressions, and that was it really. I was on my way to being a professional developer. We'd had a game published sort of before on the 64 called Battle Ball, but the publisher went under before it got published. But thankfully, I banked the cheque, and that cheque paid towards my Amiga 1000, which then allowed me to create a portfolio work and then get some work doing Amiga stuff. So yeah, that was my way in.
Yeah. And since this is an Amiga show, we should probably talk about, was the Amiga really a sea change for you personally in terms of your ability to be productive as an artist? Oh,
definitely. I watched an episode of Micro Live when Fred Harris was demoing the A1000. And I was like absolutely blown away. This machine came out and you think, this. I mean, I've said this before, but it felt like the future had arrived. This machine had been transported from somewhere in the future and it had landed there. And I thought, I really want one of those. And when I got one, and I got to have a go on D-Paint, and just blown away, because what it did, it enabled you to be creative with no restrictions or no sense of restriction. When you're doing stuff on the 8-bits, you've got restrictions every time you're doing something, whether it's colour restrictions, resolution, restrictions, everything. But with the Amiga, you had none of that. Obviously you had restrictions, but from an 8-bit machine to a 16-bit machine like the Amiga, you felt like you had the world in front of you. You could do whatever you wanted. So, that's pretty much how I sort of saw it.
Mm-hmm. And were you a D-Paint guy?
Yeah, definitely. I used D-Paint 2 initially, went to D-Paint 3, and then I discovered a program called Brilliance, which was, I think that came out when D-Paint 4 had come out. By then, D-Paint 4 was really good, but you needed a bit of a faster machine to run it because they put so much in it. And Brilliance was a lot quicker to use, so I switched to using Brilliance for all my pixel artwork then on. But D-Paint was pretty much the software that really got me sort of into a big way. It was a fantastic bit of software.
Yeah. So how long after that did you start hooking up with the Sensible guys?
Well, I mean, this is another strange turn of events. There used to be a weekly computer magazine that used to come out over here. I can't remember what it was called. And they used to have this, it was like a black and white thing, and it was every week or every 2 weeks it would come out. And in the back, they would have adverts from game developers or publishers looking for people. And one week I looked at it and they had Sensible Software was advertising for artists and programmers. Well, I built up a bit of a portfolio doing these budget games I'd worked on and a few other personal projects I'd done just for my own sort of time. And I thought, shall I send a disc in? And I didn't. I thought, no, they won't want to take my work. It's Sensible, they're like rock stars. And this little voice in my head said, got nothing to lose. Do it. So I did. I put a portfolio together. Did it. I made it say auto-booted, so I just put it in and it just played a nice slideshow. And didn't expect to hear anything, to be honest. I thought, that's it, And lo and behold, I get a letter back saying, we'd like to invite you in for an interview. So, okay, this is interesting. So I didn't drive at the time. So my dad drove me up to a place called March in Cambridgeshire. And bear in mind, I'm from Ilford in Essex. So we went on this quite long drive at the time and went for this interview. And it went all right. It was okay. They had about 10 people on this list that they was interviewing. So again, didn't think I'd get the job because, it's Sensible Software, they're like rock stars. And that was it. And then next thing I know, a couple of weeks later, I get a letter saying, you've got the job. Whoa, would you like to come up to have a chat about, what you're going to be doing there? So I did. And they gave me this list, this short list. And on this list was all these names of people, which I still got somewhere, and I never showed it to anybody. And it was me and one other guy, and there was like one or two points between us, and they'd scored it. So I was like that close to not getting that job. So yeah, and that was it really. That was a turning point where I, joined Sensible and became one of the gang.
Yeah. What was the first project you worked on with them?
Well, at the time, they were finishing Megalomania and they were finishing WizKid. So when I went up there, I was basically invited to work on Cannon Fodder, which wasn't called Cannon Fodder then. It was just a game that was, a game. I think they called it, and I think Mike's sitting up there, Lemmings with Guns was the code name. So, yeah, he's laughing. That was the code name. That's what you said. We're going to call it Lemmings with Guns because they didn't have a name for it. And it's like, okay. But then it all went pretty much sour because Mirasoft, who they'd had a deal with, was going under and it was all looking pretty bad. And there was a very, very high chance that Sensible would have gone under because they couldn't get a deal, which meant that the job that I was employed to do wouldn't have happened. So for about 2 months after I'd actually been given the job, we didn't actually do a lot. We was working on other bits and pieces. And I think we ended up a little bit fuzzy because the start of Cannon Fodder and the start of Megalomania on the Mega Drive were around the same time. But we worked on Mega Drive Megalomania, converting that. So although I was working on Cannon Fodder initially, I did then jump over to doing the Mega Drive version of Megalomania. So.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the Amiga and the Mega Drive, there were a lot of ports back and forth. In terms of the graphical capabilities of the Mega Drive versus the Amiga, did you have to do a lot of tweaks to make one work on the other?
Yeah, I mean just to let you know, I'm a huge fan of the Mega Drive. I absolutely love the machine as a player and as a developer. But one thing it really bugs me is it's got a 512 colour palette, and you can only have 4 palettes on screen at once. So you've got like 16 colours times 4. Well, you've got an Amiga, which has got a 4096 colour palette. One problem you've got is that when you convert your graphics over, you get a step of the colour, but it's trying to fit them into. It's like porting an Amiga going to an ST. It looks rubbish. It's not. Any ST owners in here? It's a lot of rubbish in here. Here's the door. What are you doing in here? But you go. I do like the ST. I really do. It's not like it's just banter, isn't it? But one of the problems as a developer is you think, well, how'd you get around that? Now, some developers would use stippling, which I was never really a fan of. But thankfully, the graphics that John had done for Megalomania were quite bright and quite colourful, and they lended themselves really well to going on the Mega Drive. Now, one of the other problems with the Mega Drive was that it doesn't have bitmap graphics. It has character-based graphics tiles, so you haven't got a lot of memory. So we had to retake all the backgrounds and actually turn them into little maps, so like 8x8 characters, and recreate the backgrounds using tiles. So we did that. But it was brilliant. I absolutely loved working on it. There's a lot of challenging involved in getting it to work on the Mega Drive, but Jules and I we worked really hard to do a good job on it, and I'm really proud of it. And so it was a challenge, and it wasn't a straight port. You couldn't just say take it and go, there you go. Totally different architecture. You got the Amiga, which has got a lot of memory. Mega Drive's only got it's got 64K working memory. So you're trying to squeeze an awful lot into a little space. And it's a big challenge. Yeah.
What was the culture like at Sensible back then?
Rock star. No. It was good. I mean, in all honesty, we all had the same goal. And I think one of the reasons that I got on well with them is because we all have this single goal of making a good game. There was no bullshit in terms of like, oh, well, I'm not coming in today, or we all just got on with it. And I think that was the magic at that time at Sensible, was that everybody who worked there, it was only a small crowd of us. And there's Jules, myself, got John, Chris, and then you got Chris Chapman, Dave Corn would come in and go sometimes. And you had like Richard Joseph, who would sort of later come on to do all the music. But we all got on really well. And we all had a single focal point, which was to make the games the best we could, in our respective skill sets. And that was it. But along the way, we all had a good laugh. It was like a load of mates in an office all day long having a laugh. We got a load of work done, but it was very light-hearted. It was, we were always joking. One day we had, in the old March offices, Chris Yates went out one day and he came back with a load of radio-controlled cars. And where our offices were based, we had it was right next to the old railway line. And on the other side was the actual main station into March. And there was like a disused bit. And the platform was still there, like the goods platform. So we had this bank of like chargers on the wall. with all the rechargeable batteries, and we would just go take these radar controls out, the cars out, and just launch them off this platform. And then we'd go back and do a bit more work. And that was the sort of environment it was.
Yeah. Now, this was the sort of the era of the rock star programmers for the Amiga. You had the Bitmap brothers taking promotional photos with sunglasses, with a helicopter and stuff. Did you actively hate those guys?
No.
No,
they were a great bunch. No, honestly, we didn't. We got on well with them. But the rivalry thing works, doesn't it? In terms of the press, they love all that. So you play up to it a little bit. But no, we all got on well.
Was there some contact? I mean, you and Team 17, Bitmap Brothers, did you guys ever talk to each other or collaborate? Not collaborate.
From my point of view, no, because I was just like a foot soldier, I suppose. I think later, I mean, with the internet appearing, then obviously that kind of thing became more common. You could interact with people more. But certainly back then, the only interactions you'd have with other developers was if you met them at trade events or went on a jolly somewhere. But I mean, in terms of going back to the rivalry thing, I was never really aware of any rivalry between us at that level. Not in a kind of like a bitter and twisted way.
Yeah,
it was always like lighthearted, Yeah.
Did you ever feel trapped by only designing games with many tiny men?
No. The thing is, it's an interesting point because I've said this before. We were known for these kind of games with these little sprites, and it became almost like an accidental kind of like image that we portrayed because I didn't design the original games. I mean, John and Chris were the designers, and then we all chipped in design ideas as we went along. But we wanted to show as much as we could on screen. Well, with the Amiga's resolution, you can't do that unless you zoom out and make everything smaller, which is what we did. So, Megalomania did it, Sensi Soccer did it, so we had to do it with Cannon Fodder. And it wasn't really because we'd created this image that Sensi will do these little sprites. It's just that the game designs demanded that. And that's pretty much it. I'd like to say, we thought we'd come up with this really good image and, we'd be known for these little sprites. But it really wasn't like that. It really was down to the design. The game design demanded that. So that's why we did it,
What were some Amiga games that you saw that just blew you away from a graphics perspective?
I think the stuff from DMA, the early DMA stuff we're doing, like Big Menace, and all the other, and I like the bitmaps. Obviously, their stuff was good. Some of the stuff coming out of Germany was really good. The Turrican was really cool. I think really, the Amiga. I think that the Amiga is you get a good artist on a project and you can see it shine. So I think those games were the ones that really the bitmaps were spot on.
What about Lionheart?
Yes, Lionheart. Yeah, that was awesome. The copper effects they used on that was amazing.
Yeah,
they must have taken ages to work those colours out. Bless you. It must have ages to do the colours,
right?
Because you're doing the copper stick like that and working out the palettes. Yeah, amazing.
Now, did you ever? It's sensible. Was the Amiga always the lead platform on games?
Yeah, I think with us we saw that the market was big enough to sustain, developing on the Amiga as a sole platform and then port it to other machines afterwards. Usually the publishers wanted it ported to other platforms, but the Amiga just enabled us to do good stuff. It was a fairly easy machine to work on. It had great hardware. Well, it has great hardware. And the market was there. The market was there to sustain that kind of attitude towards development. You could create an Amiga game and you knew that you would pay back your advance and make money on top of it. And that was pretty much it. So the Amiga, definitely.
And so, because I've talked to some developers before that they were almost forced to start on the ST because it was the lowest common denominator, and then they worked out from there. But that wasn't the case.
No,
with you guys.
No. I think I would have jumped off a bridge if that happened. That's some his laugh. It's easy. God love the STA. Again, the market would allow us to do that with the Amiga. So I think if the Amiga wasn't as strong, then we would have had to gone down the ST route and then port to the Amiga, which is fine. But anyone who works that way would know that you're not really getting the best out of the Amiga because you're not using any of the custom chips. You're not doing anything. You're just porting a game that runs with a processor and a bitmap display. I'm pleased that we took that route because for me, as I said before, I'm a big fan of arcade games. So for me, the Amiga allowed me to create graphics that I would like to see in the arcades and try and replicate that style and that look. The ST wouldn't allow you to do that to the degree because it didn't have the palette, but the Amiga did. So for us, it was just like, let's push this machine as much as we can. I mean, a good example of that is in Cannon Fodder, when we was doing the sort of bit before you go onto a mission, you get the parallax section. I mean, Jules had never programmed the Amiga before. You know, he'd come from the Nintendo 8-bit, so he'd never touched an Amiga. He'd used the ST, and I knew the hardware. You know, because I've got a little bit of a programming background. I knew all the hardware in Amiga. So as an artist, I think, well, we can do this and we can do that. What about if we do this? And he knew. Oh right, okay. And I designed this parallax. I think we'll have this parallax, the helicopter going across. We can have the parallax play for. We can split the copper, do all the colours and all that sort of stuff. And he's going, what? And he had the reference manual. He's got the program. He's like, oh, yeah. So we got that running. And that to me is like, yeah, that shows the Amiga at the time. I mean, obviously you can take that to the extreme and have loads of layers and palette switching and all that sort of stuff. But that to me is for me, shows that the Amiga could do that without even breaking a sweat, you know, and it can replicate that arcade look. And it's like, well, I can eat that for breakfast, you know, what's next? And that to me is, you know, that's what it was about.
What were the development machines you used? Did you use big box Amigas in the office? Or?
Yeah, I mean, before I started at Sensible, when I was dabbling, I used DevPack on Amiga to do a lot of like coding. And then when I started at Sensible, they used PDS, which is like a PC with a card in, and they were linked to the Amiga through I think it was the parallel port or serial port. Well, I think it was parallel port. And you just had a disk that sat in the drive. It would just sit there and it would be waiting for information to come down the parallel port. And then the PC you compile it on a PC and it would squirt the code down the cable and run it on the Amiga. So if the machine crashed, you know, I mean, you could take, you know, you wouldn't lose anything. It would just reset the machine and carry on.
So what was the advantage? What part did the PC play in the equation?
Basically, it allowed you to develop a lot quicker.
Okay.
And I mean, there were systems where you could actually have debugging information being played back in real time. So you could see, like, where is it going wrong? I mean, I never used it. I'm only going by what I saw in the office.
Right.
But I mean, you know, you'd see, like, give an example. Chris Chapman, when he was developing Sensi Soccer, he would be doing lots of timings on the screen. And he would change the copper, he'd change the background, then he'd have little post-it notes. And he'd put a post-it note on the screen with a little pen mark so it'd match up with the line. And then if he changed the code and the line went up, he goes, right, that's faster. Because he knows the machine's taking less time.
It's a very analog way.
Yeah. And he did that. He had all these post-it notes on his screen. But then if that crashed, he could then go through without having to reload the machine, load up the code again. So it was a lot quicker to develop using that system.
Yeah. Now, at what point could you sense the winds of change blowing and sort of seeing that as the Amiga was winding down, the PC was ramping up? Was there a specific moment where you realized this was happening?
I think it was when the advent of... We heard about the PlayStation 1 coming out. We had a dev kit in the office. We got late to it. We wasn't very good at 3D. It was too late to it. But PC was basically becoming a games machine, and it was becoming more affordable. And that was it. And with the consoles as well, you've got the console coming in. So you've got PC there, and you've got these new generation of consoles appearing there with all this 3D stuff. The Amiga was like, well, what? I can't cope with this. I can't deal because I can't compete. And that's when you sort of think, actually, and with Commodore's troubles, you think, well, you know, the writing's on the wall. It's not going to last. This is going to go. And I was sad because I loved the Amiga. I love working on it. It was a fantastic machine to work on.
Were you pretty clued in on the developments on the PC side, even though you were developing Amiga games? And were you keeping up with all the graphics, the 3D graphics and stuff like that?
No, I mean, I got into 3D very late on the PC because we was going to work on a PlayStation game called Have a Nice Day, and that's for the PlayStation 1. And for that, I had to learn 3D, and I bought a PC to have at home, and I taught myself 3D Studio 4, doing all the graphics for it. But I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. It was it felt too clinical to me. I didn't like it at all. And so for me, I would rather stayed on the Amiga and the 2D stuff. So I never really did a lot of PC stuff. I did some PC stuff before I got to work with Sensible. So I did some conversion work on like CGA and some VGA stuff. But when I was at Sensible and subsequently afterwards, I didn't really do a lot of that sort of stuff. I kind of steered away from it. I moved them on to consoles.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
How disappointed were you with AGA when that appeared as the next generation?
Too little too late, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I love the AGA spec, but it's like, should have done it earlier, and I should have put a bit more into it. I think the sprites in it were never. I don't think the sprites were expanded on the AGA. Were they? It was pretty much the same. It was a bit too little.
Because you weren't really. There wasn't a lot of impetus to create AGA versions of games that
they just didn't sell enough machines, really. I think that's the key. I mean, don't forget, it's a business. So as a game developer, you're creating a product that's got to make money, so you've got to cover your development costs and make a profit for you and the publisher. And for the publisher, they've got to spend money marketing it, so they've got to make money from that, and everyone down the chain, from the distributors, shops, retail, they've all got to make money off of this product. Now, the problem is, if you're selling a machine which has got like this amazing spec, but you've only sold 5, and there's like 5,000 normal Amigas, then there's only 100 there. Well, why would I waste my time selling to 100 people? Maybe like 50% of them might buy it, so that's like 50 sales. That's going to take me 3 or 4 months' work, when I could do that one over there and I could make more money. Now, I'd love to have done some AGA versions of our games. I really would, because I love the fact of being able to do 256 colours and all the stuff that goes with it. But realistically, in the real world, unless you're a hobbyist and you're just doing it as a hobby in the spare time and you're not doing it commercially, doesn't make sense. And that's the reason the AGA, in my mind, didn't get a lot of support. Because it just wasn't commercially worthwhile.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Now, are there any Easter eggs that you've put into games that have yet to be found?
Oh, yet to be found?
Yeah. Well, tell us about some of the ones that you put in that have been found.
There's also, I don't know if you've seen the Virgin loading screen on Cannon Fodder. Yeah, that was me. No one knew about that. Really, they didn't know about that. And I was surprised that someone actually found it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, have a look on Google. But that's a joy, is using a palette, because you can take the colours down and write things, then take it back to black, and nobody knows until like 20 years later. There's the end of the Cannon Fodder with the hidden message on the end screen. That one, which we all put that in. We thought it was quite funny, but no, there wasn't really any others in there, I think. I mean, with Sensible Golf, I was going to put a flashing bloke in a rain rack that was going to jump out and go like that. And I did the sprite for it, but because the game was rushed and had to get out, it never actually went in. But that was going to be kind of like an Easter egg.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's talk a little bit about Sensible Golf.
Okay.
And I mean, what went wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, at the time, I mean, Sensible was a changing company at the time. We'd had, I mean, I'm talking, and I'm talking like from my perspective. We just finished Cannon Fodder. I'd worked on a Sega Mega Drive game for Sega, which is World Championship Soccer 2, which was a hush-hush project. Did that on the Mega Drive. They'd signed a deal, they were trying to sign a deal with the Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll game, which was this massive like point-and-click adventure, musical rock drama. And it was draining the resources of the company big time. We was in these offices in Saffron Walden, and we had this whole wing that was over the car park, which when we moved there, we didn't have. But they actually had to rent that office out to house all the artists they were taking on to do all this rendering and all the graphics for it. It was draining the money out of the company, like left, right and centre. So there was a lot of pressure to get that game into a state that they could actually get it working and make it sort of viable product to actually sell. And it wasn't going there. In the meantime, we were trying to start Cannon Fodder 2. Sensible Golf was starting at the same time. I didn't work on Cannon Fodder 2. They used most of my graphics and redid them in different colours and stuff. And then John put his own stuff into it, who took over. But I'd like to have worked on Cannon Fodder 2. I'd rather have done that. But I was working on Sensible Golf. And it's literally down to, there's no one managing it. And it was too much going on. We had Sensible World of Soccer being developed as well at the same time. There was another game which had been developed for Sensible Olympics, which was a SNES game. that was being developed. So there was all these things going on. Now, although, John and Chris were very hands-off with the management of the projects, because when it was small, because we all worked in this, it was like a group of us in one room, when it was all these projects going on, the time wasn't being spent by either of them to actually manage it properly. And time was ticking. So with Sensible Golf, we didn't have a long time to develop it. So I had loads of ideas to put stuff. It didn't go in. Jules was working on Cannon Fodder 2 and Sensible Golf at the same time. So his time was divided between two projects, which was bonkers, absolutely bonkers. So a lot of stuff in Sensible Golf just didn't go in. So, even the game now, you look at the game now, and some of the graphics aren't finished. Some of the animations were work in progress animations that ended up going into the final release. And it kills me that they went out like that. It really does, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when I do anything, and it's like, it really bugs me that I didn't get time to finish it all off.
Right.
But there's loads of stuff didn't happen in it. The backgrounds there was lots of different backgrounds I wanted to put in there. Little incidental animations, like little, like the Nintendo stuff where you get like little birds and all the stuff that we want to do that with it and have like little fish jumping out the water.
Yeah, little incidental.
Rabbits would jump around sometime, get the old flasher coming out. But none of that happened, and the presentation was kind of okay. The music was all right.
Sure.
We even shot a music video for it, but the game just, it wasn't quite there. We just missed it. It wasn't finished.
Is the music video available anywhere?
I've got it, but I can't release it because I don't own it. John's got it. I think he owns it, or I think he's got it. So yeah.
Was it a golf?
It's a private showing sort of thing.
Speaking of deadlines, how impacted were you and the team by deadlines that were sent down beyond your control?
Deadlines? What are they? Yeah, they were brutal at times. Cannon Fodder was the worst because we had to get it. Anyone who's a game developer at that time will know and appreciate that, because you've got a physical product that's got to be duplicated. So there's all this chain of a reaction that waiting to happen when you say there's the master, and you miss it. You miss Christmas. That's it. Budget's gone. You're finished. So you're always aware that you've got this deadline looming. And what I always couldn't work out is you'd send a demo disc to the publisher, and they go, yeah, and it's all working. And they somehow managed to find this mega list of bugs and things that don't work. You think, hang on a minute, that was all right when we sent it, and where did all this lot appear from? But then obviously you've got to go through and fix them all.
Right.
And so when we had the Christmas release for Cannon Fodder, it was crazy. The last few weeks of that, it's a bit of a blur, to be honest, because we was putting all-nighters and then all-nighters on top of all-nighters. And, I was doing, this is crazy, and I don't advocate this at all, but I was doing Pro Plus tablets and I was taking energy drinks at the same time, and which was brutal, absolutely brutal, because I had so much to finish. And I remember crashing for 2 days straight, just couldn't do nothing. Just left the office, stupidly drove home. I only lived a few miles away, and I just crashed, absolutely crashed out. And I couldn't, because we had so much to do. And my thing is, whenever I work with anybody, I always like to make sure they've got everything they need so they don't bother me. So it's because I can't stand people saying, "Oh, have you got that finished yet?" It's no. So I like to preempt that strike. It's no, I've got it. There you go. It's there, and that's there, that there, and that's there, and then I can get on with something else, and then that'll be ready for when they want it next. Mm-hmm. So when you've got all this list of bugs and things that need fixing, it becomes like a continuous treadmill of all right, what's next? Right, okay, what's this? And then obviously things like the Royal British Legion happen, where the poppy, and it's and the words in the office that day, and the language that I was shouting was you can't imagine. I was you're joking, and I remember doing that, and I had to run out and get a real poppy from up the road, and I went up the road, put it to the monitor and drew that one and do it 3 times. But this is what it's like as a game developer. People think, oh, it's wonderful. It is. But then when it gets to the time you've got to finish the bloody thing, you've got to just go for it. Just go for it. And it is bloody hard work. Even today, I'm still doing the odd game here and there now. And it's hard work, you know. It looks great, but what goes on behind the scenes is like, it's just boring and hard. And you just got to keep going for it. So,
do you think that most pixel artists came from your background where they had a sort of formal education? Or do you think that a lot of pixel artists were just guys that enjoyed drawing pictures on graph paper?
I think it's a mixture, to be honest. I think you've got people who obviously went the art college route and got degrees, and then they want to go into art and that. My route was, I mean, having been in the industry for a while, you get to understand that there are a lot of artists who've got no technical idea whatsoever. And I didn't realise that because I thought we was all geeks. I thought it was all geeks together, hey ho, you know. But we're not. And so for me, I personally thought I had a little bit of an advantage over other people because I had the technical knowledge and I had machines worked and I had the hardware worked. I could program a bit. So when I did graphics, you know, I would make sure they're all like 16 by 16 or 30 word aligned and whatever, and they'd be all nice, easy to put in. And then you'd hear from working from other programs, say, well, yeah, this is brilliant. He said, because the other guy I was working with, he was giving me graphics that are 21 pixels wide by 37, and I've had to cut them all out and lay them all out. You know? So I think it's a mixture. I think there were a few people who did come in from an artistic background formally. But for me, it was purely really down to that's what I want to do. And I mean, can I just say that before I'd made that decision, I was going into radio. I was going to go into broadcast radio. That's where I was heading. You know, I went looking at the BBC. I was going to go and join that and do broadcast radio. That's where I wanted to go. And then I saw, you know, bloody Jeff Minter in his bloody games. And I thought, right, okay, that's what I want to do instead. And I left all that behind. So if I hadn't done that, I probably would have gone down the radio route and whatever that may have incurred later.
Well, I ask because I've talked to people that there was a lot of fallout when you transitioned from sort of tracker-based video game music to Red Book audio, and suddenly their particular skill set wasn't valid anymore or wasn't necessary. Do you think that happened with a lot of pixel artists in the move to 3D? Do you think it cut a lot of people off?
Yeah, I mean, we had a real... I mean, you could see anyone who was around that time, I think Mike sitting there will know what I'm talking about. There was this big push to drop 2D and pixel art. Pixel art's really crap. Let's get rid of it. We want 3D. 3D's fantastic. Yeah, let's do it. And also, there's that other weird phrase when you had like the Sega Saturn had come out, and there was that kind of rendered 2D, which looked pants. It looked utter pants, you know. And you think, oh, why? You know? So you've got all these artists who can do really good pixel artwork, and they're doing 3D renders, and they're rendered to a 2D sprite. You think, why would you do that? You know, why not? You know, so I hate that. That little period is, I think, it's about a year.
I think it's rubbish. If you do it like rubbish. That's what Donkey Kong Country is, though, right?
But that's doing it properly.
Right.
That's doing it properly.
Yeah.
I'm talking about when they do it because they don't want to get someone to draw the graphics, and they just render something out, you know, and it looks. You know, it's the aliasing's rubbish. It's got stippling. It's got no. I mean, the way they did Donkey Kong Country was superb. That's a good example of using 3D rendered stuff as you know, in 2D properly. But I'm talking about the other stuff where they just use it instead of an artist. They'll just get someone to do it in 3D and just render those frames out, whack them in, and there you go.
And so, what was your journey like after you left Sensible? Where did you move?
Well, I left. I saw that the writing was on the wall because there was people. I'd say they was employing a lot of artists, and I went downstairs to make a cup of coffee one day, and there was people in the office in the kitchen. I didn't even know who they were. And I thought, oh, okay, who are you? You know, and that wasn't sensible because we was quite close. We all got on well, and we all had a laugh. So I thought, is it time for me to look for something else? And it was a very tough decision because you know you worked on some hit games. The press loved us, you know, loved all what we did. You know, I think we had some respect in the industry. People liked what we did. So I thought, well, I'm going to start my own development company. And I teamed up with a guy I was working with, and we kind of managed to get a deal with Telstar. And I left Sensible, but there was an overlap period where I was finishing my contracts with Sensible, and we were starting our own development company, which was Abstract Entertainment, and we signed a deal with Telstar to do a game called Joe Blow. And that originally was a 2D like puzzle game, and because we was desperate for the deal, they said to us, well, would you better do it as a 3D platform game? Now bear in mind, this is a 2D top-down game, and it's like and the idea was it's a little, I don't know if you've seen the game Kick or Cubicle. It's a little bit like that, right? But it was like on the Amiga and PC. It was PC 256 colour. It was going to be Amiga. I think it was doing AGA, and we were going to do 16 colour or 32 colour. And because we wanted the deal, we said, yeah, all right, we'll do that, you know. And they offered a load of money to us. Yeah, all right, because we was from Central, and it's like, okay. And that's what I did after. So I branched off from there. We got offices in Braintree, and then we set up there. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's what I went on to.
And you want to give a quick plug about your newest venture?
Oh, my new venture.
Fellow Kickstart attendee.
Yes. Well, a few. I met Tony. I mean, I've known Tony Warren, work for a long time, and we met at the Zap event last year, and got on really well. So I worked with him on he's doing a game called Wormhole Dungeon, which is a nice little adventure game he's working on. I did some graphics for him on that. And then we were talking about doing a game. And so we thought, well, we'll do a game. So we're doing it on the Spectrum next. We're doing it also on the Amiga AGA. And then we're going to do PC Stay and that. So it's just a little game we're starting on. But we are going to be releasing some screens and videos soon on it. So I won't talk too much about it until we do it. And then that way you'll see what we're doing. But yeah, it looks really cool. It's a nice little arcadey game we're doing.
Exciting.
A bit of an adventure element on it.
And putting it on the Spectrum next, that's a great...
Yeah. It's, so we've got, a ready-made audience there.
Right.
And again, with the Amiga AGA, we're going to take it and do it on the AGA Amiga as well, because we've got to do that. And we're going to do a Dreamcast version as well.
Really?
For the hell of it, yeah. I know. Tony loves the Dreamcast.
Oh, fantastic.
So I would do that on there.
All right. We got about 10 minutes left. You want to do a little Q&A?
Yeah.
All right. If you've got a question for Stu.
Let me just have a little swig first.
Raise your hand and we'll bring the mic back to you here. Anybody got a question for Stu? All right. Oh, perfect.
Stu.
Hello.
I've heard you talk before about your obsession with anti-aliasing.
Yes.
Of course, was essentially a completely manual process.
Yes.
So, for the benefit of perhaps those people that haven't heard you talk about that, I find it fascinating.
Okay.
They will too.
Yeah. What you wanted to talk about in the process, or
well, how you went about it, and what, what the benefits were, I suppose, in the graphics. Perhaps for those people who, when you think about it at the time, they would have seen your graphics. I'm sure they would have been amazed by them, but perhaps wouldn't have necessarily appreciated what set them apart from less well-finished graphics.
It all stems really from me trying to create a look that almost emulated what you'd see in the arcades, because the arcades had more colours, high resolutions. And I started it on the 64, and basically it's the process of making it look like there's more colours than there actually are, and smoothing off the edges. And the way you do that, say you had like a white pixel and a black pixel, and you put the white pixel there and you drew a line like that, and then you drew the line, say, like that, you'd see like white, and then it'd be black either side. Now, if you did the in-between, so it's not going by like that, it's more like 2 down and 2 down and 2 down, you're going to get a jagged line. So what you do is you kind of put a halfway house pixel between, which is like a grey, and that kind of smooths it off. Now, the amount of intensity you put on that grey can determine whether it looks like a thick line or a thin line. So the fatter that you do the aliasing, the fatter the line becomes. And that's pretty much it. Now, the thing is, when you've got a 16 colour palette like you have with the Amiga, for most games, which is only really down to speed, because you can go to like 32 colour, but you've got an extra bit plane of information to chuck about, and it obviously takes its toll on the machine. So most games were 16 colour. So part of the process was to try and get a decent enough palette so you can alias the graphics by doing all smooth bits, but also retain enough variation in the colours at the same time. Now, one of my bugbears is when you see artists who didn't bother and everything was all blocky. And it's like, well, that to me isn't pixel art. Pixel art is doing like these stuff you see in Metal Slug where it's all smooth. And if you did want it all jerky, that's intentional because you want to show a sharp edge. So if you've got like a sword and you want to go like that, and you want that sword edge to be sharp, you wouldn't alias it at all. You have it nice and crisp, but you'd alias the back because it might be a swoosh or something, yeah? So the whole process is something I started on the 64 when I used to dabble on the 64. And then when I got onto the Amiga, I kind of thought, I can really go to town here and I can really sort of make it look nice and smooth. And even if you look at some of the, I did the box cover for Turbo Tomato. I did the loading screen for that, which is brilliant. Lovely little game, right? Nice game, that. And I've done it on that as well. It's a 32 colour screen, but if you look around the edges, it's all aliased. It's all hand-drawn. It's no like, let's do the alias button. Every pixel's hand-drawn, I mean, you can do it with a button. You say, but it looks rubbish, But I think that's the knack, is just to do it. I do pixel portraits, not plugging. I'm just telling you as it is. But when I do pixel portraits for people, it's the same process. I'll have like a photo of the person there, and then I'll be like drawing it and like, plotting the pixels as I'm seeing it on the photo, and I'm aliasing as I go. Now, I don't know how I do it. It's just years of experience of drawing stuff. But it's just like a process, and you get to do it, and you just kind of becomes part of how you draw stuff,
So visit booth 432 for your own pixel portrait.
Yeah. If anyone wants a pixel portrait, give me a shout and I'll give you a little discount.
Hiya.
Hello.
Yeah, just I worked back in J2ME games back in the day. I know some of the sensible stuff got ported to that. Did you ever have anything to do with that? Did you play them? And what did you think?
Are you talking about the
old mobile stuff?
Yeah, we did Cannon Fodder, Sensible, and there was a rugby game. Do you remember the rugby? Did you go the rugby game? No. Yeah. Well, what happened was John Hare and Mike Montgomery from Bitmaps. They set up a company called Tower Studios originally, and because I'm mates with John, he said, "Oh, do you fancy doing some of the graphics?" And I said, "Yeah, all right." So we actually I worked on the Cannon Fodder version of that and did Sensi Soccer on it. That was really restrictive. That was like, but yeah, I did work on that. Yeah, I did that, and we had like about that much space to put that much graphics in. So yeah, mental.
Right up here in the front. First row.
Cannon Fodder theme tune.
Oh right, yes.
Was you aware of it as it was being made, or did you just hear it for the first time when it was finished?
I don't recall the exact moment I heard it, because we had builds coming and going all the time. But I do seem to remember that there was a version of it that was played, and then it got the finished version later. So, but it was like, this is mad. This is like, not heard anything like it before.
Did you think you'd get into trouble for it?
So I didn't do anything. I had nothing to do with it. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. No, I think it was.
What was your reaction?
Blown away by it, really. I think it was just, I couldn't believe that they'd actually managed to get that out of an Amiga. Because most Amiga stuff at the time was just instruments. In fact, they got the singing in there, John's singing, and I mean Richard Joseph, who's no longer with us, but Richard Joseph did a fantastic job arranging that on the Amiga and getting that to play.
Yeah,
absolutely incredible. Yeah.
We were watching the Cannon Fodder video today. Were you in that? Do you have any memories of that? The CD32.
Oh right, yes, that was pretty cool actually doing that. We had a day out. They let us out for the day. That was filmed around a place called Castle Headingham in Essex, and we had to go to this fancy dress place who did all the costumes for like TV production and movie production. And we had all the uniforms. I remember picking out what I was going to wear, and then we then got to this other guy who actually owned military vehicles. It's his hobby. So, he looked like Timmy Mallet, this guy, which is that's all I remember of him. He actually looked a bit like Timmy Mallet's brother, if he had a brother. I don't know if he might have a brother. And this guy was totally.
You might have to explain to the host who Timmy.
Oh, Timmy Mallet is a 90s kids TV.
Oh, okay.
Quite irritating as well.
No idea.
He'd have this like mallet. His name was Mallet. He'd have like a mallet. He'd go like that to people. But he was really
sophisticated.
Yeah, he was irritating, really irritating. But he looked like this guy. And then we got in these army vehicles, and then we went to this location up in Castle Headingham, and that was it. And we filmed it. There's a church. We went in the back. There was a field behind the church, and we were told to just do a bit of dancing, do a bit of jumping around, and all this sort of stuff, and a few pictures. And the only thing I wish I'd known, well, I suppose all of us really, we should have been aware at the time what we was actually doing and how it would have been edited, because we didn't take it as seriously as maybe we should have done. Not in a jovial way, but if I'd have known then that it was going to be used and seen, years later, then I might have thought, oh, maybe I should put a bit more effort in. But it was like, all right, okay. And there's a bit in it where I'm pretending to be shot, and I just couldn't stop laughing. And you can see it now. If you see it, it's like, I'm like, oh. It's like, no. Yeah, but it was good fun. It was really good fun, you know. And I remember we finished filming that, and the guy who filmed it, he worked for Anglia TV, which is like a regional news station area, and he filmed it. He was the guy who filmed it for us, and then on the way back, we went in the pub on the way back, had a couple of pints, and it was a good day. It was a good day. It's nice to know that we did it, you know, rather than just not doing anything like that, because it's just an extra thing we did, like along with the cover discs and all the other stuff we did. So it's nice to look back on. And of course, we did a sensible soccer one, and we did a sensible golf one as well. So, but then I don't think they were released. I think the sensible soccer one did come out, but the golf one's never seen the light of day. So, you know, I can't show it because I don't own it, but I have got it. So yeah.
We have time for one more question. One more. Anybody?
Hi.
Hello.
One thing that's always intrigued me, and there's a few others in the room, I would imagine, you know, Monday morning we go to work. We get at the car boot yesterday. I'm for it, you know, I got follow what. How much money was in the industry? You know, when you say rock star, did the developers and the company owners earn a lot of money? Did certain people deprive you of a lot of money because what they did?
Yeah.
Did that kill it in the end? Or, you know,
that's a good question. I mean, there were sharks in the industry, and anyone who works in the industry will know that there are sharks who will just basically take the mickey out of you and just like rip you off left, right, and centre. Thankfully, I didn't experience many of them people in the early days. I mean, it's sensible the way it worked. We negotiated contracts, we negotiated a royalty rate, and that was it. And you got an advance to cover your costs for development, and then you know, which is an incentive to basically get off your backside and get the work done, and then you would get a royalty once it come out, and every 3 months you get a royalty check. So, and it's down to the individual. If you want to negotiate hard, you could negotiate to get royalties, you know, higher royalty rate. But there was money, there was definitely money, and it was a great time because games sold, you know, and all right, there was piracy, you know, and that did affect the industry. Anyone who says it didn't is a liar. It did affect the industry, but we did make money, and it was. I mean, I didn't make as much as the programmers because artists back then didn't earn as much as programmers, you know. But then the work that a programmer does, you know, is a lot more back then than what an artist would do. So rightly so, they would get a bigger slice of the pie. But having said that, I mean, the royalty checks that were coming in were just phenomenal, you know, for some of them. I mean, like Chris who did Sensi Sock, he made a good wad out of that. You know, and I made a decent amount from Cannon Fodder, you know. It was good, you know, it was nice. And the thing is, it was nice because it kind of encouraged you to work hard. Because you knew once you got that first hit out of the way, you think, this is really good. This has worked. You know, I've worked my backside off for this project, pulling all-nighters near the end, and, you know, almost killing myself. I mean, it's a stupid thing to do, really, to go without sleep and just continue working. But when you're young, you can kind of get away with it. Couldn't do it now. But when you do the next one, you think, right, okay, that was good. I'll do this again, you know. And you know that you can, if you get a hit on your hand, all that work is going to be worth it. You know? But then back then you had like different layers of middlemen. You know, you got distributors, you got your retailers, publisher. So they're all taking their cut. So you end up with, you think that the retail price is like $24.99 or $19.99 or whatever. You know, the developer gets like that much of that much pie. And you think, and from that much, you're going to pay the artist, the programmer, and the company's going to take their cut. So you think, well, from that 20 quid, oh, hang on, that's not much. So, but the volume was enough to make it worthwhile, you know. So
yeah, and I mean, you've still got your Lambo, so.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's give it up for Stoo Cambridge.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
All right, so tune back in this afternoon. I'm going to talk to Mike Daly, and until then, enjoy the show.
Cheers.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Yeah.